Jalen's mother walked over, holding a glass of iced tea in her hand. She handed it to Harold with a gentle smile. "You didn't just fix up a house," she said softly. "You gave us hope, and maybe you found something too." Harold took a slow sip, nodding in agreement. "I think I did," he replied. "For years I chased everything they say matters. Money, power, recognition. But none of it ever felt like this. None of it ever filled me the way this moment does." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Jalen joined them on the porch, his energy still buzzing. He looked at Harold, his face more serious than usual. "Mr. Harold," he said, "I've been thinking about all of this. What you did for us. I want to do something like that too. One day, I want to help people the way you did." Harold placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, his voice steady and kind. "Jalen, you already have. Your kindness started all of this. Don't ever lose that." The three of them sat quietly, watching the sky turn from soft gold to deep, glowing orange. The warmth in the air lingered, but there was something deeper. The kind of warmth that only comes from connection, gratitude, and purpose. When it was time for Harold to leave, Jalen and his mom walked him to the car. The boy's bright smile and his mother's tearful eyes stayed with Harold as he drove away. This wasn't goodbye, he realized. It was the beginning of something new for all of them. In the weeks that followed, Jalen's curiosity about construction grew into a true passion. Harold arranged for him to shadow the crew that had rebuilt the house. Jalen soaked in every lesson, eager to learn more each day, and Harold kept returning to Brookvale again and again. Each visit felt less like a visit, and more like coming home. He no longer felt like an outsider. He was part of something genuine and real, and for the first time in decades, he felt at peace. This story ended where it had started. In a small town, full of quiet strength and quiet hearts, where one boy's simple act of kindness reminded an old man of the most important truth of all. It's not about what you own, but what you choose to give. Jalen stood quietly beside his mother, his usual spark replaced with a thoughtful gaze. Harold crouched slightly, looking him in the eye. "You taught me something, Jalen," he said gently. "Helping people isn't about wealth. It's about being there, and I want to be there for you." Over the following weeks, the little house in Brookvale began to change. The sagging porch was rebuilt with strong timber. The leaking roof was replaced. Out back, the broken swing set was swapped out for a brand new one. Inside, walls got a fresh coat of paint, floors were refinished, and the old kitchen was transformed with modern appliances. At first, Jalen insisted on helping, carrying boards, sweeping sawdust, doing anything he could. But Harold smiled and gently waved him off. "Your job," he said, "is to enjoy being a kid, at least for a little while." Even so, Jalen often peeked outside, watching the crew in action with wide, curious eyes. He was fascinated, studying how they measured, cut, and built. One of the workers, a big guy named Marcus, noticed Jalen's interest and handed him a tape measure. "Want to help me out?" he asked. Soon, Jalen was asking questions about every tool and material. His energy was contagious. Harold watched from the porch, feeling something stir in his chest, a pride he hadn't known in ages. For the first time in years, he felt like he was part of something real, something that mattered. Jalen's excitement reminded him of the drive he once had, before his world became all suits and meetings. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the renovation was nearly done. The family stood on the porch, taking it all in. Jalen's mother turned to Harold, her voice thick with emotion. "This isn't just a house anymore," she said. "It's a home. I don't even know how to thank you." Harold shook his head, his voice quiet. "You already did. You reminded me what life is supposed to be. Family, connection, and meaning. If anything, I should be thanking you. The final day of the project felt like a small celebration. Neighbors stopped by, curious, smiling, bringing little gifts, fresh bread, jars of homemade jam, a potted fern. Jalen's laughter echoed through the yard as he raced around with his friends, showing off the new swing set and the freshly painted rooms. The house, once tired and quiet, was now full of color and joy. Harold leaned against the new porch railing, watching it all unfold. He couldn't remember the last time he felt this kind of happiness. Pure, simple, rooted in watching others thrive. Jalen smiled and glanced toward the house. "Mom works hard," he said. "I just try to help where I can." Harold stood silent for a moment, letting the words sink in. He thought back to his own childhood, growing up in a place not unlike this. His parents had worked non-stop just to make ends meet, teaching him resilience and the value of effort. But somewhere along the way, he'd lost that connection. Chasing money and recognition had slowly replaced the lessons he once held dear. Now, standing here in Jalen's yard, he felt something unexpected, nostalgia, and maybe a little regret. "I'd like to do something for you and your mom," Harold said at last. Jalen stood upright, his face cautious. "We're okay, sir. We don't really need anything." Harold shook his head. "It's not about needing. It's about what's right. You helped me. I'd like to return that kindness." Before Jalen could respond, his mother stepped out onto the porch, drying her hands on a towel. "Jalen, wash up before lunch," she called. Then she looked toward Harold. "Would you like to join us? It's nothing fancy, but you're more than welcome." Harold hesitated. He wasn't used to such invitations, but there was honesty in her tone that left no space for polite refusal. "I'd love to," he replied, following her inside. The kitchen smelled of fresh bread and roasted vegetables. The table was small, surrounded by mismatched chairs, but carefully arranged. Harold took a seat, his tailored suit feeling out of place among these humble surroundings. Jalen washed up and joined them with his usual calm smile. As they ate, Harold found himself drawn in. Jalen spoke of school, his friends, and his dream of becoming an engineer. His mother shared stories about the town, speaking with quiet pride about how neighbors looked out for each other. Harold listened closely, feeling a warmth he hadn't known in years. His own house, with all its luxury, had never felt this alive. After lunch, as they cleared the plates, Harold turned to Jalen's mom. "You've done an incredible job raising him," he said sincerely. "He's got more heart than most people I know." She smiled, eyes shimmering with emotion. "Thank you. He's a good boy. We've had our tough times, but we've learned to appreciate the little things." Harold nodded, his mind already moving ahead. He didn't want to intrude, but he couldn't leave without giving something in return. This family had offered him something he didn't even realize he was missing, a reminder of what really matters. That afternoon, he left their home with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Driving back to his estate, his thoughts were already forming a plan. This wasn't about charity. It was about honoring their strength and Jalen's selfless spirit. They deserved more than broken fences and secondhand furniture. They deserved stability and a little recognition. The next morning, Harold made phone calls. Lots of them. He reached out to old contacts, builders, and suppliers. By noon, everything was set in motion. Within a week, trucks began pulling up outside the house. Workers stepped out, unloading tools and materials. Harold stood by the sidewalk with a clipboard, coordinating the upgrades. Jalen and his mother watched, stunned. "You didn't have to do this," his mother said, her voice shaky. "We've managed just fine on our own." Harold turned to her, his voice steady. "You've done more than manage. You've flourished. But you gave me something I didn't know I was missing. Now let me give something back." The next morning, Harold couldn't shake the feeling that something had been left unfinished. He didn't know if it was guilt, gratitude, or plain curiosity. But whatever it was, it pushed him to get back in his car and retrace the same country road from the day before. He stopped at gas stations, roadside cafes, and grocery stores, asking anyone who would listen if they'd seen a teen boy matching the description. Most people just shrugged until an elderly woman at a tiny bakery finally spoke. "Sounds like you're talking about Jalen," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "That boy's always lending a hand around here. He lives with his mom over in Brookvale." Brookvale, Harold repeated, making a mental note. The town was nearly an hour away, tucked at the base of the Marlin Hills. The scenery was beautiful, but Harold barely noticed. His thoughts kept drifting. What kind of life did Jalen have? Who raised a kid that thoughtful and selfless? When he reached Brookvale, the streets were quiet, lined with humble homes and corner shops. Asking around, he was eventually directed to a weathered little house on the edge of town. It looked old, but well kept. A sagging porch, flowers in chipped pots. Harold parked, then paused. He wasn't even sure what he was going to say. Taking a steadying breath, he knocked. A woman in her early 40s answered. She looked tired, but kind. Sharp eyes scanned him with curiosity. "Can I help you?" "Good morning," Harold began, clearing his throat. "Sorry to bother you. I think I met your son yesterday. Jalen?" "He helped me with a flat tire." Face softened immediately. "That sounds like my Jalen," she said with a proud little smile. "He's always helping people out." "I just wanted to thank him properly," Harold said. "He wouldn't take anything from me yesterday." She nodded and stepped aside. "He's out back if you'd like to say hello." Inside, Harold took in the small home. It was simple, but full of life. Well-worn furniture, walls covered with family pictures, and childlike drawings from years ago. It was nothing like his marble-floored mansion, but it felt warm, authentic. In the backyard, Jalen was repairing a section of fence. He looked up, surprised. "Hey, mister," he said, wiping his hands. "What are you doing here?" Harold smiled, feeling oddly nervous. "I wanted to thank you again. You helped me when I really needed it. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it." Jalen shrugged, his expression honest and relaxed. It wasn't a big deal, but to Harold, it had been. And he needed Jalen to understand that. Jalen leaned on the fence, watching him quietly. There was a stillness in the air that made Harold feel slightly off balance, like he was the one being evaluated. "I don't think you understand just how much it meant," Harold said softly. "Most people don't stop to help unless they get something in return." Jalen tilted his head, puzzled by the thought. "If I see someone who needs help, and I can help, why wouldn't I?" Harold was struck by how simple that logic was. Looking around the yard, he noticed the patched fence, the uneven grass, and a broken swing set leaning behind the house. It was obvious. This family didn't have much, but they made the best of what they had. "You're a sharp kid," Harold said sincerely. "Your mother must be proud." Harold Whitman, a wealthy man in his late 70s, sat alone in his graphite-colored Jaguar, tapping his fingers against the steering wheel. The air conditioning barely managed to push back the intense Mississippi heat. Retired after a lifetime, in corporate management, Harold was used to having things go his way. But that day, he found himself stuck with a flat tire on a quiet country road, far from his luxurious home on the outskirts of Glenford. He tried calling for roadside assistance, but his phone had no signal. Letting out a frustrated sigh, he realized he had no choice but to wait. Just then, he spotted a figure approaching in the distance. A boy, maybe 13 or 14, wearing a worn-out hoodie and old sneakers, walked toward him with a steady stride. The boy examined the car, then looked up and gave a small nod. "Got a flat tire, sir?" he asked, calm and composed. Harold gave a slow nod. Yes, I was trying to call for help, but there's no service out here. The boy smiled faintly. I can help with that, he said, already crouching beside the tire. My uncle taught me how to change one last year. Do you have a spare? Harold pointed to the trunk, watching as the boy pulled out the tools with practiced ease. He moved confidently, his hands steady and sure, as if he'd done this many times before. Harold stood quietly, a sense of humility rising inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long while. He thought about offering the boy a tip, but the young man stayed focused, hardly lifting his eyes from the task. Within minutes, the job was done. The boy wiped his hands on his jeans and gave a small, satisfied smile. All set, he said simply. Harold reached into his wallet, pulling out a few bills. Here, he said. I really appreciate your help. But the boy stepped back, raising a polite hand. Thank you, sir. But I don't need anything. I'm just glad I could help. Harold stood there, surprised, the money still in his hand, watching the boy walk away. As he slipped the cash back into his wallet and got back into the car, he kept looking in the rearview mirror. The boy's figure grew smaller in the distance, and for the rest of the drive, Harold couldn't stop thinking about him. There was something about that boy, a quiet dignity, a strength that didn't come from wealth, but from something deeper. That evening, in his grand study, Harold sat in silence. His dinner remained untouched. He kept seeing that smile. In all his years filled with deals and expectations, he couldn't remember the last time someone helped him for nothing in return. No reward, no motive, just kindness.